if you've ever been on a diet before, you probably understand that you need to get into a calorie deficit in order to lose weight. Basically, all that means is that you are consuming less calories than what your body is burning, and that allows your body to then use those stored fat cells as energy, and then it depletes them over time. And so a calorie deficit is the number one thing that you need to have when it comes to losing weight, and theoretically any kind of foods, no matter what you're eating, whether that is burgers and chips, as long as you're eating less calories than you burn, then you should be able to be losing fat. And this is evidenced by the fact that keto does work, a plant-based diet does work. There are so many different diets out there, and if you get into a calorie deficit, they all do work. And this is actually based on the first law of thermodynamics, which is that energy cannot be just created or destroyed. It operates inside of that system. So while that's understood and it's scientifically accepted that we must get into a calorie deficit, just knowing this does not make it any easier to stop going through drive-thrus and actually adhere to your diet and lose fat. There's two key things that just being in a calorie deficit doesn't actually take into account. Number one is calories are not created equal. Even calorie for calorie, some foods are simply better for weight loss than others. Kind of obvious. I think we all know that chips are not as good for weight loss as something like broccoli, even if you would eat the same amount of calories. Secondly, is different types of foods and different types of diets are not all created equal in how easy they are to stick to. The elephant in the room for any kind of diet is adherence. And if what you're doing is not satisfying or enjoyable or sustainable, something that you can conceivably do long term, then no matter how big that calorie deficit is, no matter how fast you start losing weight, over a longer term, you will not get to that goal. I was talking to someone the other day who was prescribed an 800 calorie diet by their doctor because they need to lose a lot of weight. The thing is, they have so much weight that they need to lose that just to be in a healthy BMI, it is going to take them over a year of steady weight loss to be able to be at that point. There is no chance that someone is going to adhere to an 800 calorie a day diet for years on end. It is just not possible. If we were robots and we could simply program our brains to eat a really low calorie diet that was faster for fat loss because it was a bigger calorie deficit, then that would be fine. We'd go on with our lives and we'd get to our goals faster. But realistically, it takes months, if not years, to actually get lasting results. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. The 3 key ways of being able to do this so that you can not only speed up the process, but more importantly, actually get to the finish line. Step number 1 is to choose unprocessed food. What happens when you process things is that you remove the water and the fiber, but the calories stay the same. So something that had a lot of volume to begin with goes down into something very, very small, but it's still extremely calorie dense. And now, instead of having something that you would have been able to maybe eat 100 calories by having a bowl full of food, you can eat those same 100 calories in a couple of mouthfuls. Calorie density is just the concentration of calories in a given weight of food. And the less processing a food has, the more likely it is to be low in calorie density. These are things like vegetables, fruits, potatoes, whole grains, intact grains like oat groats as opposed to just oatmeal. It's things like brown rice or any kind of legumes. And these foods really are so low in calorie density that it's very easy for us to get into a calorie deficit by eating a lot of them. The easiest way to think about whether something is processed or not is to ask yourself, did this have an original form? If it's something like oil, for example, which happens to be the highest calorie food on the planet at 4,000 calories per pound, it started as something like a seed or an olive or an avocado, and it has been refined down to remove all of that water and fiber, so much of the goodness that was there in the beginning, and it is now a highly refined product in the same way that sugar is a highly refined product. So it would be far better and lower in calories to eat that intact food, the olive itself, which actually has the fiber and the water, which is diluting that calorie density. The second step is to choose low-fat foods. And there's a twofold reason to this. The first one is that fat is just simply more calorie dense than carbs or protein. 1 gram of carbs or protein is about 4 calories, whereas 1 gram of fat is about 9 calories. So more than double the calorie density. That means when you're eating a high fat source, you're getting double the amount of calories than if that was a carbohydrate or protein source. The second reason is that it's just easier for your body to convert fat into stored fat because there's no conversion process there. Whereas when you're having carbohydrates and protein, there's a little bit of a burn off. There's heat that is burnt off, there's fuel that is burnt off, so it's a less efficient process, and that means that calories are lost in that conversion. In a study that was actually designed by some of the key proponents of the keto diet to test out which was better, calorie for calorie, of a fat-based diet or a carb-based diet, they took 17 overweight people over a 2-month period and they split them into 2 groups. The first group, the high carb group, had about 50% of their calories coming from carbohydrates, about 35 coming from fat, and about 15 from protein. The second group only had about 5% of their calories coming from carbohydrates. The calorie deficit was the same for both groups at about 300 calories in terms of the deficit. So in this study, when the participants were on the high carb diet, they steadily lost body fat. But when they were switched to the ketogenic diet, the low carbohydrate diet, that rate of fat loss actually halved. So if this is true, then why do people think that the keto diet is so amazing? It's really simple, it's really sad, and it's worth trillions of dollars. And that is water weight. If you were to just look at the scales, then the keto diet actually does beat a high carb diet. There's more weight loss. But if you look behind the scene, most of that is water. And there's actually some more muscle loss that occurs as well. Because when your body can't burn carbohydrates, which is what its preferred fuel source is, it's gonna be burning fat because you're eating more fat, but it's also gonna be burning some muscle in there as well. What matters is not how much water you lose in a week, it's whether you are actually burning fat. So eating a low-fat diet and not being scared of carbs is better calorie for calorie than a keto diet. So that's an easy change to make. So calorie for calorie, a low-fat diet is better for burning stored fat than a high-fat diet. Step number 3, choose foods that are naturally high in satiety, that help you feel full and satisfied, that are also low in calorie density. And this is the biggest key because it's going to make it easier to adhere to your diet. Remember how adherence is the biggest part of fast, effective fat loss. Oh, that's kind of fun. Fast, effective fat loss is because of being able to be more consistent. I wanted to share a few contrasts in how to use this concept and swaps that you can make. The first one is swapping out something like granola for whole oats or oatmeal. And you can see in this cup here that I've got, it comes out to about 440 calories for one tiny cup of granola, which is only 100 grams. I don't know anyone that would eat such a small portion. You would not feel full after this. Most likely if I was going to eat it, I would eat 2 cups, which would take that entire meal, which is still not very filling, to over 900 calories or nearly 900 calories. On the other side, I'm starting with some oats. I've got about 70 grams, which only comes out to 270 calories. I added about half a banana, which is only about 50 calories. Adding in a cup of blueberries only adds about 80 calories, and I didn't even have a full cup to add to this. Half a cup of soy milk only adds about 50 calories. I added some water here and then microwaved it, and now it's a super filling and delicious meal, and it only comes out to about 450 calories for a ton of food. I'd also normally add some flax in there as well, which would mean that this meal was only about 500 calories, but there is a lot of food within that 500 calories. In this other example, you can see that I've got about 30 grams of oil, which comes out to 260 calories. That was pretty much half of that other meal that we made, and this would just be a dressing or something that you would cook your food in. Instead, I'm going to be using some avocado. I've got half a small avocado that works out to about 160 calories. This is a much lower in calorie density and satiety food that is also going to have a ton more flavor, and you can see that this is such an easy swap to make simply by asking that question of which is the more refined product. There's another example here where you can see there's about 30 grams of peanut butter, which is about 2 tablespoons, which works out to 180 calories for really not much food there. Whereas if we use some PB powder, which has the fat removed, which is why it's lower in calories, that comes out to about the same, but that's 12 tablespoons worth. So you can see these calorie density concepts really make a huge difference to how much food you can eat. When it comes to satiety, potatoes have the highest satiety index, which means that it's very, very easy to get full on them. It's very easy to get satisfied. So if you're on a weight loss journey, rather than fearing potatoes, eat a ton more of them, because they are incredibly hard to overeat on calories, and they're only about 400 calories per pound, which is pretty darn low. I also like to add legumes, beans, peas, chickpeas to my meals, because legumes have a long-term hunger suppressant, which is a positive thing when you're trying to lose weight. And that means that I feel more satisfied from those meals that have those. So do some experimentation and keep that in mind, asking yourself, is this meal keeping me full and satisfied? Because then you're going to find it easier to stick to. I thought it would be cool to show you what a full day of eating this way and planning out those meals looks like in terms of calories, in terms of volume versus high calorie dense foods. And so you can visualize why it's not just about eating in a calorie deficit, but actually prioritizing low calorie density and high satiety. Let's do that. So as you can see, there is a phenomenal difference in the amount of food that you can eat for around that 1800 calorie mark. And so this food right here is not only going to be in a good range in terms of getting into a calorie deficit for most women, it does vary a little bit, but it's also going to be very filling and very satisfying. There's a lot of food here. Whereas in this side of it, this is the same amount of calories and there is very, very little food because it is extremely calorie dense. And even though this looks like quite a lot of volume of food, the weight of it is incredibly small. And I, realistically, because these taste pretty darn good, would be able to eat more than this, especially if I was just feeling like I was having a bad day. You think about how small this little thing of peanuts is, which is about 260 calories. That's pretty insane. That's half of this meal right here. So hopefully this gives you an idea and a visual of how important it is to prioritize low calorie dense food, not just count calories or not just think about calories when you are trying to lose weight, because this kind of food, even if you were to count every calorie, is extremely unlikely that you would be able to eat just this and call it a day. I can't even stop right now. And even with some processed food like the teriyaki sauce, the tofu, and the yogurt and the soy milk that I'm using, this is still a really, really low calorie dense meal or day, and it would be extremely filling. This is how I've lost weight, 40 pounds to be exact, over the past 4 or so years, and I've also kept it off over that time, and it's how hundreds of women inside of our program and many other people as well have lost weight using these principles. And I'm not saying that you can never eat foods like this, because obviously I'm eating them now. I do incorporate small amounts in my diet, but the majority of my meals are low calorie density, whole foods, and that's what keeps me full and satisfied. Meaning I actually got consistent rather than having to use a ton of willpower like I did with every other diet previous to understanding these concepts. All right, so I'm gonna give this a taste test now. And the thing about sushi bowls is you should always give them a good mix. This is very cold right now because I've been filming, but let's give it a go and see how it tastes. Look at that goodness. Sushi bowls are a staple in this house, and they change your life because you can use whatever kind of ingredients you have on hand. You just need some rice and veg, and they're always delicious. I've never seen a sushi bowl I did not like. Nick's laughing, he's like, that's terrible, Charles. All right, there we go. So good. Let me know in the comments of those 3 things, which one are you going to apply and have found most helpful. And if you're wanting help to kickstart your weight loss, then definitely check out my free mini course on exactly the 5-step framework that I use to start losing weight and building bowls like this. It's going to help you out big time. And if you're wanting more personal help, accountability, and understanding how to use behavioral change tools to actually get the weight off and join the hundreds of women that have done this inside of our program, Lean with Plants, then you can also find more information about that in the description. We'd love to hear from you and also help you to lose this weight for good. All right, that really is goodbye. I'll see you next week. Bye.